بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Jum'at Mubarak also. I am sorry that I cannot speak Turkish and I have to speak in English, but inshallah I will try to learn. Your Excellency, Chairman of this esteemed university, Professor Terhan, and the eminent scholars and professors and sheikhs who are here, all the graduate and the undergraduate students, all guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you very much for taking a portion from your Friday to be with us today, and thank you for your sohbah and for your accommodation and hospitality. I am honored to be sitting next to a great figure in the areas of psychotherapy and psychiatry and psychology and neurology and all the sciences that have to do with the mental health of the human being and the spiritual health of the human being. Professor Dr. Terhan, I am really honored to meet him for the first time and to be hosted at this great university that in a very short time has achieved a very high reputation, not only in these areas but in various other areas of the sciences and the social and the humanistic sciences. I am especially impressed by the combination of the highest discipline in the most contemporary sciences with the deepest reverence and respect for ethical and spiritual values. And that right next to the microscopes and the telescopes and all the scientific equipment, we also have a Center for Sufi Studies in this esteemed university. I am also especially struck by the fact that this university is already associated with Kyoto University in Japan, speaking about spiritual things today. It reminds me of the fact that Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi rahmatullahi alayh already addressed the questions of a Japanese admiral at the time, and he already speaks of writing to himself while the Japanese are listening, as he says in the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri. And through the today's technology of broadcasting, we greet our colleagues in Japan and throughout the world as we inshallah approach the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri of Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi rahmatullahi alayh. Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi in several places in the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri and throughout the Rasail Al-Nur asks humbly the readers of his books to do dua for him and to read the Fatiha for his soul. And I would like to oblige to that request that he explicitly makes in his writings to ask for the Fatiha on his soul and the souls of all our scholars with the asanid متصلة all the way to Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم. فاتحة. أقول وبالله التوفيق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. I started my journey learning about Rasail Al-Nur and the amazing and deep thought of Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi way back in the 90s, especially in 1997 and 1998, when a small group of Nursi scholars and students came to visit Malaysia, where I was teaching for 1 year. And amongst them was my dear friend and brother and elder brother Abi, as we say, Faris Abi, and Ihsan Abi, Ihsan Qasim Salihi, and Abdul Wahid Abi. They came for a visit 1997-98. And I visited just 2 days ago Ustad Ihsan Qasim Salihi, who wrote this book about his journey with Rasail Al-Nur. طبعا إحسان قاسم الصالحي حفظه الله إحسان قاسم صالحي, may Allah give him good health, inshallah, translated the Rasail Al-Nur into Arabic. But there is one book he did not translate, and that is because it is written in Arabic itself, and this is the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri. But still Ihsan Qasim Abi made a huge effort because he edited the book. So he did not translate, but he edited and prepared for publication. So when I visited Ihsan Abi 2 days ago, I asked him, Ihsan Abi, what should I say? I am going to be speaking about the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri on Jum'ah. What should I say? And he said, speak about two things. The distinction between al-ma'na al-harfi wal-ma'na al-ismi, and about the passage where Badi' Zaman Nursi rahmatullah alayhi says that the reader must come to him to see what he sees. So he said, speak about the distinction and speak about this very strange request that Ustad makes in the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri about inviting the reader to come to him. Now, why do we focus on this particular book? It is because the Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi himself says that this book is the nursery or the incubator for all of the Rasail al-Nur. He says that the Rasail al-Nur are 50 years worth of exegesis of this one book. So this book is actually the very seed of Rasail al-Nur. This is why for me personally, my highest goal in Nursi studies is to translate the book into English with a commentary, but it has been more like a dream because of the events of my life. It is a promise. It's a promise which I made to Ihsan Abi many years ago. Inshallah, I will fulfill it. I would like to start on page 117 of the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri, where Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi says that I have accumulated through 40 years of my life and through 30 years of my scholarly endeavors 4 utterances and 4 sentences. We will focus on only the utterances, not the sentences. The 4 utterances, he says, are al-ma'na al-harfi, al-ma'na al-ismi, al-niyya, wal-nadar. نبدأ بالمعنى الحرفي والمعنى الاسمي. In the Arabic language, in grammar, and the Ustad says that he actually picked this from Arabic grammar and that this was a divine disclosure that he got as he was studying grammar. There is a distinction between the harf and the ism, between prepositions and postpositions and proper nouns or names. In Arabic grammar, the distinction basically is that nouns indicate by themselves something definitive, while the harf always needs to be connected to a noun to have any meaning. So for example, I can say school, and it means school, but I can say to, as in to, it doesn't mean much, but if I say I go to school, then this to has a significance because it's now linked with an ism. One of the puzzling things about the Rasail al-Nur is that this distinction keeps coming up in most of the Rasail al-Nur, and the Ustad always makes a huge emphasis on it, that this is very important, that this is very fundamental, that this is vital, that this is essential. Why? And this has to do with 2 modes of being, 2 ways of being in the world. And to make it as clear as possible, I will use a mithal or example. And the use of analogical reasoning is something that is very much encouraged by Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi. You have psychiatric hospitals, professor, doctor, and let us give an example of a man who gets brought by an ambulance from the highway to Ankara. He's brought by an ambulance to the psychiatric ward, and they bring him and they say this man is confused. Why is he confused? Because the police found him on the way to Ankara in front of a big sign that said Ankara, big blue sign, sitting, measuring, looking, touching the sign. And when the police asked him, what are you doing? He said, I am studying Ankara. I came to Ankara. And the police say, this man is crazy. How can he say that he is in Ankara or with Ankara or studying Ankara? This is a sign that points to Ankara, but it's not Ankara itself. So they bring him to the hospital. But the fact is, we bring this man to the psychiatric ward, but we don't bring most of humanity to the psychiatric ward, even though most of humanity makes the same mistake. How is this? This is what Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi tries to explain. We often make the mistake of seeing things in the world as mere things, not as signs of something else, signs pointing to the creator of these things. So when you see the sign as the thing, you make a big mistake. And you can build an entire civilization based on the study of things as things without taking into consideration that they point to their creator. And this is what Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi calls false civilization, al-madaniyya al-za'ifa. We go back to the example of the man with the sign. It is possible for him to study the sign very scientifically. So he can mathematically study the size of the letters, the size of the sign, the angles between the lines of the letters. So there can be a mathematical science of the sign. And if he were a physicist, he can study the physics of the Ankara sign. He can develop meteorological theories about the composition of the metal from which it's made. He can do Rockwell testing of the hardness of the aluminum from which it's made. He can study the reflection of the light on the sign. And he can produce a book on the physics of the sign. The chemist can study the chemistry of the paint from which the sign is made. And the biologist can study the bacteria and the algae that is stuck to the surface of the sign. But notice, with all this knowledge, he has not reached Ankara. So he is not ignorant, but he still fails to achieve the truth of Ankara. So he can achieve ulum, but without haqa'iq, because he is not seeing the signification of the sign. He is only seeing its physicality, its isness or being as a thing, not as a thing that points to something else. Philosophically, someone who studies the sign as a thing can produce an entire ontology, a science of being about the sign. But this ontology will never be an ayatology, a study of things that point to their creator. So we can say that the ontology of Badi' Zaman Nursi rahmatullah alayh is actually a semiotics, a semiological ontology. It is ontology of signs, not of things. Yeah. So his approach is closer to Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, Morris, people who saw the universe as signs, not just as mere things. However, it's very important to note that this is not just semiotics because of the divine dimension, because of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal that are manifested in these ayat. That part is not in the writings of Peirce and Morris and James. This is something beyond semiotics. It's like a theological semiotics. It's a very respectful, reverential semiotics. Because for Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi, when you study a thing, you study the names of its maker. If I take this very simple artifact, it's an artifact made by a human being. But there are many things that I can know about this human being just by looking at the artifact. For example, from this sugar cube, I can immediately see that the maker of this sugar cube knows the chemistry of sugar and how to extract sugar from sugar cane and how to press it to make it into a cube. So there is knowledge of techne, or technology. There is science of how to extract sugar. We also know that the maker is a chemist and knows how to make not only the sugar but the paper that wraps the sugar. We know that he knows how to do processes, how to design tools in a factory to do the tooling necessary for the sequence of operations that can produce this. So if somebody asks me, who made the sugar? I can say, I don't know what his name is. I don't even know the factory. Okay, supposing it's not written. But I know the following. The maker has the name smart, intelligent, crafty, industrial, chemist. I already know names associated with this thing just by considering it as an artifact. Meaning, the thing already points to the names of its maker. For Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi, al-ma'na al-ismi is to see this in itself. Just to take it and use it and not think about its maker. But the ma'na al-harfi makes me say, this means nothing in itself. It only means when I associate it with its source. Where does it come from? Who makes this? And by thinking about it in this way, I already associate it with names. Meaning, it only has meaning when it points to the names of its maker. So basically what we have in the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri and the entire Rasail Al-Nur is basically a divine semiotics. A semiotics that looks at all things as indicators pointing to their maker. And he has many contemplations of plants and animals and water and rain, where he explains how you can see the Asma' al-Husna, the names of the maker manifested in the artifact that is before us, so that you can see the hikmah, or from the hikmah you can see Hakim, from the wisdom you can see that he is wise, from the ilm that is embodied in something you can see that he is alim, from the fact that something is sustained you can know that he is qayyum, from the continuity of things you know that he is da'im. So you know the names of Allah Azza wa Jal through the creation, because every creature is a trace or a athar that points to a divine act, fi'l, that points to a divine name, ism, that points to a divine attribute, sifa, that ultimately points to that al-aliyya. Allahumma ارزقنا حسن الخاتمة بتوحيدها. تعالى المولى عن كل التشبيهات علوا كبيرا. Let us do them in a sequence. It is athar, points to fi'l, the fi'l points to ism, the ism points to sifa, and the sifa points to the that. So living in a universe or a cosmos full of divine signs that are pointing to the af'al and the asma and the sifat, and ultimately to the fa'il al-wahid al-ahad, is a completely different way of living from someone who deals with things with physics and chemistry and biology as things without considering them under their creaturely mode. So basically the Shaykh is saying, rahmatullah alayhi, that I learned after 40 years of experience that basically there is a different mode of being in the world, Dasein as Heidegger would say, that the Muslim's Dasein, because he sees things as ayat, is completely different than the Dasein of the one who denies the creator, the atheist. Why? Because he is only seeing mere things. He is not seeing divine signs. It's two different ways of being in the world. So the life world of the one who sees divine signs is very different than the life world of one who does not see the signs but only things. The Lebenwelt is completely different. Right. And this is the fundamental truth that he discovered through 40 years of contemplation. And this is foundational. It really is a foundational difference, and extremely important to know this difference between al-ma'na al-harfi and al-ma'na al-ismi. We come now to the word niyya and nadar, because the Shaykh says there are 4 utterances. Al-ma'na al-harfi, al-ma'na al-ismi, we discussed this. And then an-niyya wa nadar. An-niyya is intention, intentionality. Another is contemplation, seeing. It is equivalent to the Greek theoria. It is cognition. All of this is another. Okay. Let us come to these 2 words. An-niyya for Ustad Nursi rahmatullah alayh includes many things. Not only directedness towards Allah Azza wa Jal, wahid al-qibla, be focused on Allah Azza wa Jal and His Quran and His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is one meaning, but there is also other meanings that have to do with attitude, how you come to see things, with what attitude you come. And when you are approaching things, the divine signs, you can approach them with different attitudes. And the attitude makes a difference on what you receive. Ustad Nursi rahmatullah alayh has a concept of abundance or jood, generosity, divine generosity. Allah Azza wa Jal is generous. He is abundant. He gives. But what I take depends on how I come to take. If I come to a generous host like yourself and I say, Lutfan Effendim, can I have one tea? You are very generous, so you give me the tea. But if I say, give me the tea, you are unlikely to give me the tea. You say, what is this man? You know, where does this come? What is, you know, you would not give me. Why? Because my attitude is not the right attitude. Divine generosity, which is abundantly clear, abundantly giving in all the signs of Allah Azza wa Jal, only gives you and reaches you if you come with iftiqar, with your demonstration of your inner poverty, your maskana, your inkisar, your recognition of your need. This is extremely important. The niyyah that he speaks of includes the right attitude of approaching the divine signs. And that is why his way is called Ajzi Mandi, it's the way of Ajz. It is the way of abandonment. Tarki dunya, tarki uqba, tarki hasti, tarki tark. When niyyah includes all this. And this is why Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi says that niyyah is iksir. Iksir that transforms dust into gold. You know, the old alchemists used to search for the iksir, for the elixir, I think they call it in English. When you pour it on any base metal, it makes it into gold. This was the ultimate goal of the old alchemical tradition. He is saying that niyyah is transformative. When you pour it on anything, it makes it into gold. It makes it into worship. So Ustad Badi' Zaman Nursi sees this niyyah as an integral part of nadar. And now we come to this very important word. In Ilm al-Kalam, nadar is a fundamental word, very, very important. عند الإمام الأشعري كما في as in the book of Ibn Furak on the مقالات of Imam al-Ash'ari, Imam al-Baqillani, الإمام الغزالي, الإمام الرازي, الإمام الجويني رحمة الله على الجميع. وعند السادة الماتريدية عند الإمام الماتريدي، عند أبو المعين النسفي، عند عمر النسفي رحمة الله على الجميع، حتى في بدء الأمالي. النظر is the very foundation of the entire approach to Ilm al-Kalam, which means it is Ilm al-Kalam begins in seeing, in a kind of seeing. But what is this seeing? Imam al-Juwayni in his book Al-Jadal says that nadar includes many meanings. The meaning of looking, just looking. But there is also the meaning of waiting. As you say, intadhirni, wait for me. And it also includes the meaning of being patient with someone, okay? So that you give him nadar, like a consideration. So it has the meaning of contemplation, patient, consideration, all in nadar. All of these meanings from the classical tradition of the Ash'ari and the Maturidiyya are all included in Nursi's notion of nadar. The word is very rich. It includes all of this. All the books he read about Ilm al-Kalam, all that was said on nadar is included in his concept of nadar. He represents the tradition of Imam Taftazani that reconciled the Maturidi and the Ash'ari schools, and the khulasa, the essence of what they say about nadar is already included in his notion of nadar. So it's very important. So if we are to relate this to the new sciences that Professor Doctor studies, like cognitive science, for example, and we want to say, is nadar cognition? We say yes, nadar is cognition, plus cognition with humility, cognition with respect, cognition with patience, cognition with kind consideration, cognition with compassion and marhamat. Our cognition is very different than just cognition in the intellectual sense only. It has all those meanings bundled in. And it is cognition of not mere things, but of divine signs that point to the Asma of Allah Azza wa Jal and ultimately point to Allah Azza wa Jal as their maker. So, Husserl, the German philosopher, wanted to develop a science of seeing. He called it phenomenology. The science of studying phenomena. Phenomenon is that which is zahir, that which is apparent. So the study of things as they appear is phenomenology. And after Husserl, there was Roman Ingarden, his student, there were others, and before him his teacher Franz Brentano. They were all developing phenomenology. The question is, from a philosophical perspective, is Badi'u Zaman Nursi a phenomenologist? Is he developing a science of seeing? And I would say it is just as it is cognition plus, this is phenomenology plus. Because it is phenomenology plus numenology. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, in his famous book, The Critique of Pure Reason, makes a distinction between noumena and phenomena. He says all that appears to the mind is is phenomena, and the thing itself is the noumenon, or the noumena, the plural, or the numinous realm or domain, that which cannot be known. Okay? So he has this important distinction. Zahir and batin would be a good translation. Badi' Zaman Nursi rahmatullah alayh did not believe, like Kant, that we can only cognize with the brain cognitive intellectual things without seeing the depth. He actually went beyond the mere cognition of phenomena to the cognition of noumena, that which is beyond appearances. And the reason for that is because he did not limit the human faculty to nous, to only cogito or cognition, but actually believes that we have qalb and ruh, and that this qalb and ruh can transcend just the appearances and can actually make a journey into the domains beyond the appearances. Ustad Nursi lived in a very empirical time when the physicists believed in empiricism and mechanistic materialism. And some people, if I say that Ustad Nursi is an empiricist, maybe people will get upset. And how can you say that about Ustad? He's not empiricist. I think he is empiricist plus, meaning he is an empiricist that uses the scientific method of observation and recording what he sees, but he flies in domains that are beyond materiality, meaning he is a broader empiricist. Let me try to make this clearer. If I am a doctor, a physician, and I don't have access to today's technology, I am an empiricist, as in Sextus Empiricus, for example. He was a doctor. Empiricus actually meant physician, doctor. So he's empirical. He can check the pulse, like Ibn Sina. He can check the color of the sweat or the urine, and he can check the temperature in a rough way, and he can make empirical observations, and he can record all these observations. Today's doctor is also empirical, but he is a broader empirical person. He has more, because now he can use the X-ray to see through you. He can use the MRI to check. He can use chemical analysis. He can use... So he is still empirical, but he has a broader range of observations. Sitting here, I can say that I see all of you and I see everything in the room. Alhamdulillah, I have good eyesight, more or less, and I can see everything. And if I say I see everything, it's correct, the statement. However, if somebody else has ultra-red goggles or infrared goggles or ultraviolet goggles or sonar or radar, they can see more. So he Ustad Nursi is actually walking around and making observations. And he says in the Al-Mathawi Al-Arabi Al-Nuri, please don't blame me for some of the difficulties. I am only recording what I see. So he's actually seeing all these things. He's actually seeing them. And this is because he is walking in domains that we have made close to ourselves. Why? Because we stick to the ma'na harfi, to the ma'na ismi, and miss the ma'na harfi. And this is why in the very important passage in page 222, he says, I know this is difficult for you, reader, but I am not writing for you. I am writing for me. And I'm writing for me as I see things. So when you are thinking that I'm writing for you, you're actually seeing my words backwards like in a mirror. For you to see what I see, come, please be my guest in my own head with my own eyes and see what I see. Then you will understand. With the adhan of Maghrib, let me conclude this in a very short passage. He's Asr. He's basically saying, Rahmatullahi alayhi, look, that's all he's saying. But look with the right attitude. Look at things as divine signs and pointers to divine names, not just as things. And look with all your faculties. He is telling you, you are not just a doctor from the 19th century. You have MRI, you have X-ray, you have CT, you have scan, use your equipment. Okay. And your equipment, the most important, is your qalb. He makes an instruction. He says, تخلى, clean it. توجه, direct yourself. قابل, come, make an alignment. And you will see that you have equipment that is more than just your cognition. And like a bird that does not know that it has wings, he is telling you, you have wings. Fly in the domain of ruh, so that you can actually see things, not only in this time, but in the past and in the future, because in the world of ruh, all this temporal and spatial limitation is actually just an illusion. And he is giving us his basically laboratory observation books, the Rasail An-Nur. All his observations of the things he saw as he floated around in this life, but with the right attitude and with the right distinction between معنى حرفي and معنى اسمي. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولكافر المسلمين. With this I conclude. I'm sorry about the awkwardness because of the translation and so on. It's a little bit. And thank you for the heroic effort. Part of there is a very profound thing which he says. He says that in part of the reason he says some people may find it difficult to understand me is because they don't have the same ailments and injuries that I have. And I think one of the reasons Rasail An-Nur will become more luminescent and will be more important today is because finally many Muslim cultures are having the same injuries that he felt in the beginning of the 20th century. Meaning the danger of ilhad is now huge in many Arab countries. It wasn't like that even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So atheism is becoming a huge threat. The devaluation of all values, so the injuries themselves make the discourse important or not important. So he's saying that it will be difficult for you to understand if you don't have the same kinds of injuries. And this is a very important point. I think as humanity shows more and more injuries of the types that he recognized, he will become clearer and clearer in what he says, inshallah. But at the same time, I must warn you against something. It is okay to love someone or to love a scholar, to see that they are this is my sheikh, this is my, and it's very natural when you love someone like that to not see anything else. Majnoon Layla sees only Layla, Yeah. Even the tree is Layla and the moon is Layla, and So, but it's very important not to disrespect the beloveds of others. Yeah. Because the beloveds of others are their Laylas,
Yeah.
And especially when our own Ustad, rahmatullah alayh, showed the utmost respect for Sayyidi Abdul Qadir Jailani in several passages, for Sayyidi Ahmad Rifa'i in several passages, for Sayyidi Shadili in several passages. As a matter of fact, he says, I bring nothing except what Imam Rabbani, Rumi and Imam Ghazali say. So you have to be careful, because he never meant any disrespect to everybody else. Is there any other Nursi? No. But there is no other Ghazali and there is no other Rumi either. So as Professor Al-Barsalan was pointing out, so we love him and we think he's the greatest, but without any disrespect to all our other scholars and traditions. I think one of the reasons for the apparent conflict is because we change processes into things. We exercise what's called reification of processes. So when we say al-qalb, it sounds like a faculty. When we say al-aql, it sounds like a faculty. While in fact, if you look carefully at the Quran and the Sunnah, neither of them is a faculty. They're both actually processes or af'al. You know, قلوب يعقلون بها لا يعقلون بها. You see, there is a faculty that's who we are, the ana, as Nursi would say. One of the processes of this identity is intellection, which is al-aql. One of the processes is what do you call it, al-ma'rifah, higher ma'rifah. So these are different processes and different levels of processes. When you're ascending, it's very easy, if you hit the ceiling, to think that this is it. But somebody who's on the third floor can see that this is only a glass ceiling, that there is still more and more. So sometimes what seems conflictual from below actually looks quite unified from above. Meaning true gnosis would include all the ma'arif, including the scientific ones and the empirical ones, if they were true, if they're not fake, you know. So I don't think that haqa'iq can ever conflict with haqa'iq. But as you well know, 80% of so-called science is not haqa'iq, but models, theories, approximations, simulations, and the evidence is every 30, 40 years we have new things. At one point, people thought that physics was finished with Newton, you know. Then came, Einstein. Then Einstein, people thought was finished. Then quantum mechanics came. And now all sorts of weird things are happening in physics. So it's a وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ inshallah. But it's I think ultimately there is no conflict. It is all unified in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And now, even in contemporary, we are at a neurological, probably the most important neurology seat of learning in Turkey. Neurology today is actually showing that it's more than just cognition. That the brain does a lot more than just cognition. There is emotional reasoning, creative reasoning. The imagination is becoming clearer, so that what Ibn Arabi rahmatullah alayhi and Ibn Sab'in and others were saying about Hadrat al-Khayal is now becoming clearer. So even contemporary, the most contemporary of science is not the mechanistic psychology of Wundt and these people. It's things have, with cognitive science and so on, have advanced quite a bit, So
we are saying we are moving on from reductionist.
I think the narrow empiricism of the beginning of the 20th century and the dogmatism of the Vienna Circle is breaking down. And with its breaking down, we are seeing more domains, just as Carl Jung saw more in the subconscious, and the humanistic psychotherapy and psychologists are seeing more. Neurology today is seeing more. And I think the broader it becomes, the easier it is to understand some of the things that Ustad is saying. Indeed, however, he does tend to group them together. And when he speaks of Jamal and Jalal and Kamal, he is kind of clustering the names in a kind of areas of sifat, which is very interesting. But he's closer to Ibn Arabi and Ibn Sab'in and Jili than to the Ash'aris. And the fact that he saved Iman in a very big geography, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
And I think we need to save Iman in other geographies, including the Arab world today and Indonesia, Malaysia, Europe, inshallah. This is changing, and we need to be in dialogue with people who understand this. For example, there is now a whole cosmology of alignment and attunement. For example, that the Earth is in a very precise place. So there are people, there are creationists who use the argument from design and so on. We should be engaged with these people, because Imam Nursi rahmatullah alayhi never given up on them. He believes that there is he said that Europe is pregnant with with Islam, and this is so true. It's no one has monopoly on wisdom. Allah Azza wa Jal surprises us always, so that nobody can say that wisdom is in his pocket. I think that there are plenty, and they're writing, and they are very. Some of the scholars, Michel Thomas, for example, is a Catholic priest, and he wrote some of the best writings on Rasail al-Nur. David Ford in Cambridge, Peter Oakes in Virginia. There are many people who are very reasonable people, alhamdulillah.